Welcome everyone across the globe, whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, whichever time zone you are from. We would like to thank you for joining us today for this exciting telecom webinar. We have some great speakers, but before that, let me set up the day for you. We are about to dive into a very interesting topic, leveraging next-gen technologies for telecom transformation. Your presence adds great value to the session. I'm thrilled to begin by introducing myself and AI CoreSpot as a company to you. My name is Nitin Naveen, Vice President, Innovation Strategy at AI CoreSpot. With a couple of decades of experience in different consulting firms focused on a lot of emerging technologies, I have had the privilege to collaborate with global leaders, stakeholders, gaining insights into their innovative problems and solving their approaches as well. Joining me today are a couple of my colleagues. In the front, we have Arvind, and the back end, we have Naveen, whose dedication has been instrumental in shaping this event. So, a lot of applause for their efforts as we kick off this session. For today's webinar, we are asking a fascinating topic, as I said in the beginning, which is telecom transformation using next-gen technologies. Our speakers will delve into a lot of aspects like good data governance, AI applications, role of IT consulting companies, economic value, challenges, next frontier, future, and so on. The panel promises in-depth insights and engaging discussions that are not to be missed out. So before we dive deeper, let's highlight a few key points. Today's webinar wouldn't have been possible without our community partners. So special thanks to all our partners for today, Altis, Hello Networks, Comcast, and Infovision for their significant contribution in making this event successful. A heartfelt thanks to all our attendees for taking the time to join us. Your participation is invaluable, and we hope you leave with actionable insights and some meaningful connections to take in the future. At AI CoreSpot, our ultimate goal is to help you gain knowledge, build relationships, and spark innovations. So let me introduce our esteemed speakers for today one by one now. Our first speaker is Sundar Krishnan, Director AI ML at Altis. Our second speaker is Todd Laundrie, Chief Technology Officer at Hello Networks. Our third speaker is Vivek Parmar, Chief Business Officer, handling telecom vertical at Infovision. Our fourth speaker is David Sedlock, who was Chief Data Officer at Zayo Group. Our fifth speaker is Sri Nandan, who is VP AI Products and Experiences at Comcast. And sixth speaker and moderator for today's webinar is Manish Busi, who is Industry Principal Telecom at Infovision. Please note, the views shared by all our speakers are their own and do not necessarily represent their respective organizations. With that said, I'll pass the stage to Manish to kick off this engaging panel discussion. Good to you, Manish.
Thanks, Nitin. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here today. We have a very interesting and intriguing topic to cover on this webinar. The telecom industry is a great place to be as it's constantly changing and evolving. As high-speed connectivity becomes fairly ubiquitous, telecom service providers as well as OEMs are always looking for ways in which they can leverage technologies like AI, ML, data, 5G, APIs, etc., to remain competitive, efficient, and future-ready. Let's explore how telecom companies can leverage these technologies to transform their operations, enhance customer experience, and unlock new revenue streams. So without further ado, let's talk about, I guess before we talk about AI, because that's a trap that we can all fall into, but let's take a step back and highlight the importance of data in AI, right? Data is the foundation of AI, and the AI systems are only as effective as the quality, quantity, and relevance of the data that they're trained on. So David, let's start with you. According to you, how important is good data governance for data and AI monetization?
Well, I can't say it's more important. It's the most important thing, to be honest with you. You have to have a solid foundation for not just the platform and the capabilities, but you also have to have data products that you go through a structured approach and methodology that is gold standard, and you can point whether it be data science, ML, or AI too. The example of this is for a good while, I was known as Mr. No inside Zayo for AI. And, I told it, my first board meeting was the second day, and I just said, I'm not doing AI. And I did it very controversially. I said it purposefully because I wanted to make sure that people knew that I'm not just going to go do AI to do AI. I have to do it in a way that we know the quality of data is good and it goes through a structured approach and everybody aligns to it. Then we can scale for there. So what I told them was it's no for now. It's not no for never. It's no for now. We're going to build these capabilities out. We're going to have that and ultimately have gold data sets that we then go and leverage. And I refuse to, put AI on top of any of the data because it's the bad data or that's not gold standard. Then to do it, so I refuse to do that until we got to that point. So for me, I took a very very hard stance on it. The board and executive leadership bought into it, and so I was afforded that opportunity.
Right. Now that's well put. So Vivek, in terms of how IT consulting and maybe digital consulting companies can support various communication service providers as well as OEMs in terms of good data governance, I mean, what are you seeing in the market and kind of how important is it? And obviously, how maybe some firms can support that initiative.
Yeah. So in short, I mean, without governance, you're gambling with a lot of things. You're gambling with risk, inefficiencies, and a challenge to monetization in general. And with it, actually, you are building a scalable and a trustworthy, as well as a monetizable data ecosystem. So data governance is absolutely critical, not just for compliance, but for creating something which is real, which is usable value for both data and AI. And if you don't know exactly where your data is, how accurate it is, or maybe who owns it, you can't really trust the insights that come out of it, right? In any ways,
Right.
and definitely you can't monetize it. So governance kind of makes sure that your data is clean and it is consistent and it is ready for whatever you want to do with it. I mean, you want to build analytical models on top of it. You want to go to the next step, do AI models on top of it. You want to use it for monetization. That's the base where it all starts, right? And it also helps you move faster in many ways. When teams have like a clear rule and frameworks that are available, they spend less time cleaning data and more time building value out of it in some way. So yeah, in short, no governance, no scale. And with governance, you've got some real business impact there. uh, in fact, I know of enterprises who went about building AIML solutions uh, and even Gen AI proof of concept, and guess what? They failed without that data governance. And in our experience, what has worked is that you start with a layered strategy for such initiatives, where you kind of consolidate all your data sources, something like an MDM or a master data management, using whatever data lake strategy that you have. You start from there and then pick up use cases that you can build on top of it as the second layer. You run AI ML models, whatever you want to, and then the next layer could potentially be Gen AI for you. So that's how we kind of envision this whole progressive building of layers on data. And in our experience, data democratization has been the key overall to achieving different outcomes. And it's important that you cater to the user persona, right? For example, a business user may have a different outcome that they may expect from a data system than a senior executive or a regulatory body. So we've got to kind of have that data combination within the organization to deliver the outcomes that you're looking for.
Yeah, no, so basically taking a layered approach. Coming to the perspectives of, say, a cable service provider, Sundar, how are you guys going about, enabling good data governance practices and how that's kind of hopefully turning into something that you can, monetize in the future?
I mean, that's a great question, by the way. And I think I wanted to echo some of the points in terms of this data governance that Todd and also Vivek have brought up, right? I think, and people who are going to speak after me is also going to say, and emphasize on the data governance aspect of it, because that's where I think everywhere starts, right? So essentially, I want to go back to some of the experiences that I've had back at Comcast and also right within the company that I'm right now, where, the first thing that we noticed was building the first data lake is actually a critical challenge. And then on top of it, ensuring that the data quality on the data lake exists, that's the second biggest challenge on it. And I think once those two things are established, then I think, like to Vivek's point, right, anything that you're sharing as part of insights, that actually kind of resonates with the business and the business stakeholders. Like, for example, I can give you, like, you're creating a report that says, hey, we have this many number of active subscribers, these many number of churns and other things, and you're going to the business and presenting it, especially the leadership team. They're going to take a look at it and say, no, that doesn't align with the financials. So what are you talking about? And that throws your insights out of the way, and you have to start all over from the scratch. That's repeated work and repeated analysis and other things. Now coming back to and then tying this to AI, ML initiators and how data is important here. Like what I can give you many examples in the here, right? Like I've seen this. And one of the things that we actually, I think there's a lot of noise on the background, sorry. But the one of the things that we saw was like to going back to the churn numbers, right? Because that's the initial thing that our company was focused on back at Comcast and also right now here as well. Like our models were actually underperforming when the data quality and the data governance was not there in the place. When I say underperforming, we built models and we deployed them, and we were actually using them for like targeting customers to save them for like retention purposes and other stuff. But what we noticed was like as these numbers are changing and fluctuating, and that doesn't align with financials, our actual models were actually kind of like perceived as of low value and were not seen as enough value by the business, right? But once we established critical data elements and we also established a data governance practice within our team, our models actually performed a lot better, and it was actually aligned with the business, number one. And then second thing, we were able to showcase values in terms of like financial growth and other stuff as well, tying to the business aspects of it. And that is direct value that you can measure as part of the stuff. And to get to that good data governance practice, you have to start from ground up, right? Number one, you have to invest in teams where you can actually build the data quality elements. And then second, or builder by, right? Like, you can do all those type of things. And then second, establishing the critical data elements, understanding where and how these, elements come from, and then make sure necessary pipelines exist, data cleaning and everything happens. And then finally putting together the govern business requirements document and other stuff that can help future, teams take further as well. So
I'm going to add something to that. I'm sorry, I cut you off. Go ahead and finish. I want to add something to it, though.
No. I think that probably answers your question, Manish, and I think gives the full picture of it. So
yeah, to your point, I think the other fundamental that people miss a lot, and I said this on my second day at Zayo as well, is I'm not the problem. The data guy building the capabilities is not the problem or challenge. What it is, and it's not a data issue. It's a business transformation challenge. To Siddharth's point, is that one of the critical things as you're doing the journey on critical data elements or the gold data sets that we've alluded to, it's identifying business data stewards and business owners, data owners in the inside the business. The business side does not perceive that they have any accountability or responsibility of the data and the quality of the data that is being input into source systems. And that's simply not the case. And that's something not just to Zayo, but I had the challenge at AT&T when I was doing as well, is that how do you, or even down to the point you have to change people's jobs descriptions that said part of your job is to, if you own the process, then you own the data, and that's you're accountable for it. And so that was a big challenge, to identify data stewards in the business, to have them identify and or agree to critical data elements. One of the most important data elements that they have to we put management and controls around it, and then hopefully having participation. Excuse me, I'm echoing there. Active participation in the development of those gold data sets, because it's not going to be fully utilizable if they're not part of it. And then to your point also is that it's not an activity, it's an operational thing that is accountable on an ongoing basis. And so that's where you have to put in the quality controls and a process as things go awry. Then how do you then go deal with data discrepancies or challenges in the data as well? And it's not a one and done, it's a constant evolution.
That's right. I think just to add on one more point to it, and I didn't want to scare off most people with this whole data governance and cleanup thing. even if the data that an organization or an enterprise has is not cleaned up, is not in a shape, fit, or form that can be consumed, there are avenues, tools, services available by which you can do that and still reach to a point where the data becomes usable in some way. So I think there is an option for everyone, every enterprise out there, to kind of get that data into a format that can be used later.
The funny thing, Vivek and David, is a lot of talk about the data. And obviously, it needs to be structured in such a manner where the consumption of the data for a purpose is meaningful. And for everyone on watching this webinar, the thing to always kind of think about is, what is the objective in the first place, right? We're not just doing it for the sake of data. So in Comcast, for example, you may collect a bunch of structured data for internal uses to optimize your network experience for your consumers. In another emerging world, we may have the ability to gather certain structured data to produce API access by applications that can use it to enhance their experience. But one of the things with this world of AI and this world of data, there's a lot of generalization about it. And I tend to kind of come back to, who's the product manager for the objective and the outcomes of any of this work on this data, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of valid points, and I think one of the things, especially what I have seen in my previous stuff, is actually, as long as, to Todd's point, David's point, right, the structuring of those teams, if that is centralized, that can actually speed up the process and kind of like ensures that one team can serve kind of like the whole organization across. We have seen some benefits back at Comcast doing that, and also we have the same structure here as well at Altus. So that kind of like speeds up the process, so that there's not like siloed teams doing this data governance and dealing with data quality issues. So yeah, back to you, Manish.
Fantastic points made by all. And I think, Sundar, you also touched upon customer churn and strategies and how you try to address that. So it kind of feeds into the customer experience, and obviously, Shri, maybe you can kind of throw some light on how cable service providers are using AI to enhance customer experience, right? Because you're facing increasing customer expectations, lots of service offerings that are fairly complex in nature sometimes, and a lot of competition out there as well. So how would you kind of be able to address that and differentiate what your offerings are by enhancing CX?
Shri, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thanks for having me here. And I just really love the discussion on the data governance and the data aspects of it. I think that really is the key. But if we had to think about how we want to leverage AI for CX, and Sundar, you were in Comcast a few years before me, and I'm here now, but some things have changed, some things haven't. The key is customer experience. Anything that we do with data, with AI, it's to create best-in-class customer experience, and lots of different ways to do it. Where we need to be looking at aggregation of data and then deciding, what does that mean? Do we need a single source of truth? Do we need to create a layer that people can use agentic AI and develop their agents and plug into? What do we do with that data? How do we contextualize it? How do we use it to personalize recommendations and offers? How do we create models that can feed into sort of like a feedback loop of customer data and create more and more hyper personalizations as the customer is moving along the journey? So a lot of different ways in which AI can touch customer experience from the back end. But beyond that, there's also the more sort of standard ways in which we can affect this, like chatbots and optimize network performance and all of those sort of traditional ways in which AI is helping us. One of the biggest things that is exploding on the scene is agentic AI, and I know that word gets sort of almost abused at this point, but the fact that we're able to create agents in a matter of hours that can dynamically affect customer experience as the customer is walking through the journey is just fantastic. So there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of technology out there. What was true 6 months ago is not true today. So we are in a constant state of experimentation, and it's just one of the best times to be in the customer experience.
And we don't know who the winners are yet.
Exactly. So we're trying to get there first.
All right. So Vivek, in terms of, again, IT consulting companies, how were you able to assist, cable service providers, other ISPs in this journey in terms of enhancing CX using AI?
Sure. Picking up from where Sri talked about, right? I mean, talking about how do you kind of all gear it towards some sort of customer experience. I think the journey typically starts around the strategy and design part of it. Data readiness and governance, we've already talked about it. Then comes the whole phase of solution development and change management, which is important. But if I were to kind of pick up maybe 2 or 3 use cases where we are kind of doing this kind of work, involves things like, how do you do a customer journey mapping? For example, it starts off by facilitating, to Todd's point, right? How do you work with the product teams to understand the customer personas, friction points, what are the business goals? And then mapping those journeys across different channels. You have your web channel, you've got your mobile channel, call center, retail, whatever, and identify those moments that really matter for the customer, right? So how those high impact moments where you can really use and add value to your customer's experience and overlay an AI technology on top of it, in areas, for example, in a next best action. How do you kind of have the next best action set out for your customer? How do you predict what the churn risk is for your customer? Or how do you predict the intent from the customer side, right? So for example, for a retail bank, we mapped out the customer journey right from account opening to loan servicing. And within that journey, we identified only specific use cases where AI was important, like, for example, a real-time KYC, right? You could automate a lot of it. How do you do credit risk scoring and cross-sell recommendations? So we did that. And then those mappings and specific use cases come about there. Another area that is really coming up is the whole personalization and recommendation angle. We've seen Netflix do that pretty well in the past for whatever they want to recommend. But how do you build or integrate recommendation engines using machine learning is one area that definitely came up. And the adjunct to that was, how do you kind of segment your audience based on behavior, based on demography, based on the transaction data that you have via credit cards, etc. with them? And how do you build that personalization logic on top of it across, again, all your digital touch points, be it emails, product pages, mobile apps, chatbots, whatever you're doing, right? So that's there. And last but not the least, I think in terms of the support aspects, things are really heating up. And I'm seeing a lot of models being built for churn, for fixing issues that are recurrent in nature. How do you kind of automatically resolve or escalate certain support tickets using these AI-powered assistants? It's something that is happening as we speak, and there is a lot of push in terms of integrating these models into your CRM systems and ticketing systems and self-service platforms like your Salesforces and the Zendesks of the world. So a lot of, honestly, kind of alerting and automation workflows are happening within the service team. So these are the 3 or 4 different areas that we are kind of seeing a lot of traction and are working with our customers on.
Hey, one thing, it's linked to that, but it's more on the I'll say building part of the capabilities. One thing that I've seen, and it's a huge benefit, and people don't usually look at it. Think about the agentic architecture and the AI agents. Think about if you're in a agile work environment and you have a PI planning every quarter, and you start thinking about all the activity. In our case, in the last couple companies, we'd have 100, 200 people involved with that, and you'd have to have requirements up front and talking about what would be qualifying, that would be consideration. So think about an agentic architecture where you're doing recordings of what your requirements are by the respective business areas, and then those recordings of the requirements, and say, here's what we're trying to do and why, and prompt a few questions, and then you can drop that directly in to an agentic model and framework and agents, and ultimately it, within hours, you will have, business requirements, a strategy, use cases, user stories, testing scripts, all spec'd out. And so when you're coming together in your PI planning, you're not talking about the requirements. You're actually talking about here's how we're going to execute against the requirements, and what do we need to fine tune and tweak off of those. The value add of that is, just think about how much time that would take. You're 4 or 5 steps down the path as opposed to just thinking about what you're going to go do and talking about it. And that's one that doesn't normally get discussed, but it's kind of how you then ultimately build everything. And you can even have samples in a short period of time, examples of what the output would that be based upon what everybody recorded, and review it in the PI planning sessions. Right. So, people have to play different roles in the sense that you always got to have a human in the middle on the using AI agents. You're going to have that for the foreseeable future, but you can have other agents checking quality on each other. But that upfront piece is a component that is usually missed. You start talking about just development of code, but the prep into that is a huge accelerator that can be leveraged.
We're back to that requirement thing, and it's almost, David, you start to paint a picture of a utopia where we're going to have listeners from all of our clients, our customers, and the engine is going to be able to decode that into new requirements, ultimately then code it into the data set, and then turn it back around into new CX. And get a lot of automation in that entire workflow. I agree with your comment about, you got to monitor the AI children as that workflow happens, because, both good things can happen and bad things can happen in that process. But in theory, that's a utopia that could, really optimize the work stream from requirements to outputs, right?
It also engages the business more too, because they'll perceive, not just perception, it's reality. It's you're optimizing their time, where they don't have to sit in something for 3 days, or they can give a recording about it and they can see the output. And so it's a huge thing, I think, in the future that we can leverage.
It used to be that if you want to go to market with customer experience, you have to figure it out as you go. That's the agile way, right? And I think that's still true. We still need to be agile, but it's suddenly become more waterfall-y, because the more requirements you give your AI, the better off your outputs are. So now you're actually building it all out up front and then feeding it, and it's just changed how we're thinking about what speed and go to market means. I mean, you still have to work in an agile way, but your methodology is a little bit more waterfall than, and I know it's sort of a controversial thing to say waterfall, but that seems to be the sort of good way to get the AI to learn and move faster.
I would think you could structure it in still an agile methodology, right? You could have the outputs come in the form of stories that then you build AI sprints around to try and solve for the stories, right? Versus a large bucket of definition that then there's a lot of work done on it, and then something big falls out sometime down the time. And that gives you opportunity for iterative learning on the results of the outcomes, right? So you could have optimizations going on story outcomes in an agile topology, and have multiple threads of that in play all the time.
Absolutely. Great points made by all participants. We did have some questions coming in from the audience as well. So maybe we can touch upon one or two of these. Can you share an example of where the business case for adopting a next-gen technology completely failed, but you taught your team a critical lesson? So maybe David, you can kick us off with that, and just maybe give an example of where there was some good lessons learned.
David, please unmute yourself. Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to make sure the sound quality was good for everybody. I'll be generic to start. I think my experience is on this is, hey, let's go do AI. And when you don't have, when that just generic term comes out, and just go do it, and you do this, the kind of the spaghetti approach, throw against the wall what fits, that is absolutely destined for failure. And I, last 2.5 years is really more the first 6 months that I was at Zayo that we had a lot of this going on. And then we started accumulating the list, and suppose just put spaghetti against the wall. We said, timeout, timeout. Like we're not going to do this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to have one, accumulate what people are requesting. First of all, like what's the business requirement, what's the driver from it, not because a lot of times people across the business will tell you how to get it done. That's not what we should be talking about. It's what problem we're trying to solve. So educating, for example, my team around, we have an input mechanism. Let's gather, make a list, and then we start looking what I call a pathway to value. So we would go down the list based upon, we started off with myself and the CFO that would prioritize these requests and say, well, we focused on churn first. We focused on rev rec. We focused on service delivery, what fits in those categories. And then we would look at 2 to 3 week window to say, can we prove a pathway to value? Right. And if we could not prove a pathway to value, then we crossed the line through it. It went to the bottom line. The next thing came up. So where it's not a specific exact example, we had a lot of them, in my first 6 months. And I just said, not doing it anymore. We're going to have a centralized approach around this. That the good thing also is I had to go to the board every month and talk about what we're doing. So we'd say, here's the things that we're working on, and get that validation. So we also have the kind of the top down that says, here's the target we're going to focus on. Here's the 5 that we see a pathway to value. Still can shoot craps, or they can get value out of them. So I think having that learned discipline of failure, and then say we need to have I'll say structured discipline. It's not controls in such a way that you shall not do, but it was more, here's how we're going to structure it. We're going to put this discipline in place, and this is how we're going to line up with driving value back to the business. So I know it's not just one scenario. It was dozens of those that occurred across the board.
This is always an interesting question, because there's we have a world of technology where we have technology looking for a problem kind of statement quite often. And I'll share one that everybody's kind of read about in one way, shape, or form. And I think we're in the midst of ways in which AI can actually do a better job. And that's a scenario of, I'm in an area like a campus, university, school campus, city area, and I want to know if there's shots being fired from a weapon. And all of us have seen people take audio engineering and build a way to detect that a gunshot has been fired. Now, every time I've looked at this problem statement, my response has always been so the alarm from that is to send a team over there with body bags, because the ballistics have already left the weapon. Somebody's harmed if bullets are flying, right? So why did we not approach the problem in a different way? And there are some new, very, very intriguing technologies out there being deployed now that are much more proactive threat detection. Most cities, universities, campuses have hundreds, if not thousands, of cameras. So there's eyeballs everywhere. And the newer technologies, which is where the smart data and the smart AI comes into play, that I've tested and observed, says we are going to look for threat protection before it happens. Can I tell if somebody's somewhere they don't belong, if somebody might be, concealing a weapon, if somebody's entering an area that they're not supposed to be entering, and move into certain lockdowns or go thwart that threat protection before any ballistics leave a weapon, right? And that's an area where I think there's a lot of tech that has emerged out there and been deployed, but it doesn't really solve the ultimate problem that we want to. We want to avoid unfortunately, a death from a weapon. And the best way to do that is be much more proactive. And the only way to do that is to really use AI technologies to do that, because you can't deploy enough humans to do that effectively, right? And that's one area where tech has kind of failed, and I think we as an industry need to recover from it. Bit off base from mainstream discussion, but easy to kind of get your head around, right?
So I can add to this as well, right? So one of the POCs, I should say, I mean, I think most of the people here are touching upon starting with a POC and then showcasing the value, which is right, because, without value and without, the truth thing aspect of like, how can you actually meet your business requirements? I don't think so. You're not able to adopt those new next gen technologies, right, in your company. And there's like this two aspect that I would like to kind of bring up or set up as like my first initial point, which is your leadership team willing to take those risks, or is your leadership team kind of like focusing on like, and as essentially, right, like most teams are constrained on budgets, and so therefore leadership team is not willing. If the team is not like willing to take those risks, you're not able to like get past beyond the POC stage for most of the ideas. And I think that's where, because of the constrained budget and other things, that I value and the use case aspect of it come into play. And one of the examples that I kind of saw where is we built a POC where we started listening to like a user can come into, like when they're watching TV, they can just speak to their remote and then say like whatever the language that they want to speak in. Especially because when my parents came here in US, they were struggling to watch the TV channels because everything was in English and they don't speak English. And so I thought like, okay, that sparked an idea, like saying like, okay, if they speak in their own native tongue, it can auto detect the language that they're speaking and then start showcasing the content titles in their language. And that is something that we did as a POC back in the day, and it didn't go anywhere because of two things. One is like in and by itself, the scalability aspect of it was an issue for that idea. And then the second thing was like, how much money should we have to invest to kind of bring this technology in? And then I think at that point of time, the value aspect of it was really marginal, because of like when we looked at our multilingual customers who we had as a base, it was very small. And so therefore the value aspect of it did not play into picture, and therefore we had to shut down that idea. But again, I think most of the things, what it taught us was like that they kind of like reinforces the idea of like, first let's look at the use cases and then like kind of build the value proposition there before we even go and talk about this to the leadership team. That's one. But then second, where are you kind of like working at, right? Like, that's where I talked to the first point earlier. Is the leadership team trying to willing to take those risks? And especially if you're working in a tech company where they are trying to like bring in new technologies, bring in new products like Amazon, Meta, or something like that, where that's their bread and butter, trying to like, that is a different aspect. But then there are certain technological company, like telecom company, who are focus them as technologies where they're willing to take those risks, like Netflix and other stuff. Like you could have some room. And again, that again kind of resonates with where you are and how you can actually work with the leadership team to bring that. Otherwise, you can always focus this as, and again, I always have focused this as part of like a personal pursuit of learning. And kind of like, even if you can't get it out there in a company, you kind of have that satisfaction that you at least build something that kind of works, and it will work sometime.
All right, fantastic. Thanks for the real world examples. I'm sure that was very insightful for the audience as well. And so, Todd, I know we've talked a little bit about the perspectives of cable service providers, IT consulting companies. Let's switch our attention to the mobile/wireless infrastructure providers, right? So whether those are tower companies or providers of distributed antenna systems, small cells, etc. There's a lot of talk about how these companies must evolve beyond just traditional revenue from just infrastructure, which is what they own. So what do you see as kind of the next frontier of economic value for that particular industry segment?
Yeah, no, it's a great area. And obviously, everybody on this call, whether speaking or whether a guest, has one or more of these things, right? We live and breathe on this mobile device anymore. And we kind of have this expectation that its connectivity just happens. But, even to the previous question, one might wage the question is, was 5G really of value, right? Do the majority of the subscriber user base, do they care, right? Or was the performance good enough? Now, I've for many, many years been part of the North American Standards Board of Directors, and we set forth initiatives, and one of them you can find is what's called the Next G Alliance. And a lot of the work there is now defining around 6G. And what's happening is the work there now is trying to focus on this famous topic of use cases. And the idea behind these use cases is that I can use the infrastructure to add unique value to it that now can create additional monetization from the network infrastructure. So I think one of the challenges that we face in that space is cellular network infrastructure in particular is very expensive to deploy and keep going. And when you have that infrastructure, you have essentially a foundation and you need to look for it. It's almost like having an AI engine that can do chat GTP, but you don't use it for anything else. Well, where's the economic value for it, right? Now, inside of buildings, probably one of the frontiers is in the enterprise, right? I look at it in this way. We spend a lot of time helping business owners with large scale buildings or campuses, businesses like the hotel industry, ensure that guests who come in or employees that come into those buildings continue to use their mobile phone effectively because it's become part of business, right? But the only function they get, right, they act, whether they're acting as in their business persona or their consumer persona, the functionality on the device is the same, right? The network infrastructure is pretty much used for one thing, connecting the mobile phones. Yet the investment made in that wireless infrastructure, particularly when you put it into buildings, can be used for so many other things, right? It can untether things. And I think there's a future state world that makes an argument that the world of Ethernet cabling will diminish over time because the ability to just connect more things in IT that you would normally connect with wires won't be needed. The same way, we all lived one day where we had to plug a cable into our laptop to connect it to get our email. You wouldn't really think of that anymore. In fact, most new laptops you buy, you can't even buy them with an internet connect or an Ethernet connection on the laptop. So it's assumed to be untethered. So the value, I think, that we're going to see in the telecom industry, and where there is a lot of energy at a standards level going on, the challenge is, and what I'd implore is that those of you who work in the IT side or in the business structure side or at a CIO level really need to kind of come to the party to change the DNA of the traditional telecom organizations, because we've got a DNA mismatch, right? Typical telecom infrastructure guys speak in 3GPP standards language. It sounds like Swahili to the IT organizations. And I think the transformation that we're going to begin to see here is, to the point earlier, right? I need to be able to speak into my remote and it comes out in the right language. But we're gonna see a lot of use cases of these networks emerge, and they're going to add unique new value, and they're going to add service layers on top of it, right? Lastly, to tie that off to AI, I think what we're going to begin to also see is that there's intelligence in the data infrastructure. So, for example, one of the things that a lot of organizations want to do is they want to track the utilization of their facilities and where are people throughout the course of the day, what floor are they on, what part of the floor are they on, what equipment that is mobile and being moved around, where is it? But it's a lot of these older systems in buildings are very hard to get location. Well, newer technologies can give you location on those devices down to the square meter. And as a result of that, if we open those APIs from a telecom provider perspective, such that those that are CIO organizations who are building a data governance and a data consumption topology know that they can consume that data and they can build it into their work stream plans for their IT organization or for their OT. Now we've suddenly built a lot of value from that infrastructure that didn't previously exist. You had no access to it. And today, pretty much you have no access to it, right? So I think those are some of the things that are really we're gonna start to see emerge here. And we all, as an industry, I think, got to put more energy around it.
Spot on, Todd. In fact, I really agree with your view on that. We need to get rid of this whole G business. 3G, 4G, 5G, I think, are so obsolete. I mean, I don't even want to talk about it at this point of time. I think we've done ourselves a disservice in the telecom industry, by the way, by kind of following it to the core. Like, I mean, whatever promises we made on 5G, etc. So, very valid point there. I fully subscribe to that view that you have there.
Yeah, thank you, Todd, and thank you, Vivek. Shri, I'm actually going to switch back to you. I know we talked a little bit, of course, about customer experience. Let's talk a little bit more about the business outcomes that cable service providers can kind of expect to realize if they're able to efficiently and effectively use AI to enhance CX, right? So, what are some of those long-term strategic business outcomes that you, say, in your position or in general, would kind of like to see?
I think the key word is the right use of AI. What I like to tell my team is don't build AI products, build products and then see if you want to use AI in it. But let's say we did manage to figure out the optimum way to use AI and sort of clean up our data, aggregate it, build our feedback loops, and build the recommendation engines and all of that. I think what it can do is affect customer experience in a positive way. So just standard CX metrics like churn and lifetime value and all of those show positive trends when you use the technology in the right way, and we're seeing some of that in bits and pieces. And the fact that you can do things faster also helps, because the sooner you can get customer experiences out into the market, the faster your revenue is going to grow. There's also a lot of employee experience that we can affect with AI, where we can see if AI can be used for improving the ways of working. We can do all sorts of things like vibe coding and Copilot and all of that. Can AI help our employees, our agents, do a better job of solving customer problems? We were talking about accents the other day, and there are companies out there that they can switch a button and change the accent of the agent so that they are better understandable by the customer, which is fantastic. So there's a lot of benefit from AI to the customer, which I think translates into a revenue model, and also it gives us a competitive advantage. But the problem, of course, is I think someone hit upon this earlier, is there's no point in boiling the ocean. You have to go after the sort of customer pain points that have the highest impact. So you sort of let the data drive your decisions. You start with data, end with data. You decide what are the high impact use cases, you go after it, use AI in it, and then measure if it's working. If it's not, then we should have the humility to say this is not helping our customers at all, and the outcomes are not happening, and we switch. So there's a lot of opportunity here for sure.
Right. Thank you, Shri. So David, as someone who's a former chief data officer yourself, can you tell us how CDOs can deliver business value while building data and AI capabilities? Ultimately, you're building, but then you've also got to deliver. And how can you kind of look at maybe certain short-term gains that you can look at as opposed to just having that long-term strategy in play, where an ROI might take a long time to really come in, right? So maybe if you could give us an example that would be really great.
Sure, yeah. I alluded to it a little earlier, first part of the call, but I've done this. I did it first, I'd say the first few weeks at Zayo as I joined. As I was talking with executive leadership and the board, I said, I'm going to build the foundational capabilities to build these ultimate gold data sets that we push everything towards for data science and AI. However, In the meantime, I'm going to establish what I call data and AI quick strikes. And so I had a very small organization doing this or focused on this is 4 people in total. So you don't have to, you don't have to have this big, massive group. And again, what I alluded to earlier is I partnered up with our CFO and said, based upon my historical experience and whatever it is, 20, 30 years of telecom, here's where I think we should go at. And obviously, we went after churn, we went after rev rec, we went after service delivery timeframes, and then we also looked at profitability either by product. In our case, in Zayo's case, it was by building and location. And that was the first staple that we went, 4 areas that went after. And from there, I really just kind of assigned each one of my data scientists to one of those areas. And then we went with the business and said, what challenges you're having, what are the blockers you're having in these respective areas. And then we just then also did the pathway to dollars, pathway to value, and gave it 2 or 3 weeks on each one of these. And if they did not have a pathway that we thought we could realize benefit or value, then we went to the next one on it. Now, we did this while we're building out the capabilities, the foundational platform, and I'll say the platform capabilities as well. So I knew I was dealing with a little bit of a technical debt situation, meaning that I prioritizing saving money or increasing revenue and increasing efficiency over the end state of the gold data sets, meaning that if I could save $5 million by looking at churn and do that in 6 weeks, that's worth spending the money to go do it. And then that technical debt that you built up by how you're gathering the data, well, that was then it was input into the backlog for our platform capabilities. But we still could realize the millions of dollars of savings that we went after. And so that's an approach that that I built out and did at AT&T, and I carried it forward. Because what happens, within the first 6 weeks, as becoming the CDO at Zayo, I turned myself from a cost center to a profit center. So every month when I would go up into the ELT and board, I would say, here's what we're doing. This is the progress we made. Here's the challenge we have. We need X amount of money to go after these things. But I said, but I saved us Y. And usually, almost every case, the Y or the savings is bigger than the ask. So it also makes it a lot more palatable as you're looking at this 1 to 2 year journey. If you're on this journey around how do you establish the standardization and the governance, it allows you to realize business savings and benefits while you're building out the foundational capabilities. And that's something that if you start looking at like a person in my role, and I'm assuming a lot of the people on the phone, that's why people's tenure is low, is short, and it's not as long as you think, is because you're worried about just the technology, and that's what you're focused on, but you're not looking and say, how does it benefit the organization and the business? And you have to have, it's both. It's not one or the other. It has to be both. So that's how I've done it the last couple companies, and it's proven, it's a proven track record that we can do it, and the business loves it, of course, and our CFO loves it. It's all about. It ends up being about the money as well.
That's certainly important. Thanks, David. I guess lastly, I know we haven't talked about APIs yet, and there's a lot of buzz around the API economy and monetization across various industries. So Vivek, can you maybe tell us a little bit about the role of APIs in the telecom industry, and maybe also provide some examples of use cases of APIs in telecom?
Yeah, 1 more hour because I can speak about it for a long, long time. APIs is my favorite subject. So but no, I'll try to keep it short. I mean, APIs, in my opinion, are, good bridges that are acting between whatever the network capabilities are and whatever applications that are consuming it for many ways, right? So they play a different set of roles for different type of consumptions overall, right? So from a network perspective, APIs are allowing you to expose network functionalities, whether it is, you want to control bandwidth, you want to do some sort of latency optimization. And by doing this, you can have developers integrate them into the applications that they're developing, right? So they're essentially turning the network into something that you can program from outside in some way, right? In terms of service innovation, also they're kind of opening up the infrastructure to third parties. You have the OTT players, you have the CPaaS players, so they can consume whatever the network has to offer in some way there, right? But other than that, there are a lot of other benefits that they're getting in. For example, they are allowing the internal teams as well as partners to rapidly build, test, and launch new services rather than kind of doing those custom integrations in many ways. So the standardization aspect of it comes into the play. And last but not the least, a lot of automation is being done using that. So you have systems such as your provisioning system, billing systems, customer onboarding systems, and it's these APIs are helping you reduce this cost and improve agility on that front. And the standardization bodies, including Camara from GSMA and Linux Foundation, Open APIs by TM Forum, and all that, they're going a long way in kind of making sure that we do standardize these APIs for global interoperability. And that's a step in the right direction. I know as an industry, we've dabbled it in before and failed, but I have hope that, with these newer initiatives, there will be some path forward on kind of having a standardized set of APIs which you can utilize. In terms of use cases, there are plenty of them. Some important ones that come to my mind include number verification and identity, right? For example, so APIs can allow to verify users' phone number instantly. It is, as we speak, being used by services such as Uber, by WhatsApp, etc., which allows a very quick and faster onboarding of the users without using the SMS-based OTPs, which can still be kind of compromised in some way. You can have quality on demand or quality of service on demand, so to say, for users, like a video conferencing app that can call a network API, and you can have these app-aware networking apps available that can utilize that network feature in some way. Location services, very useful in fraud prevention. They can identify the locations for you in many ways. The last one that I want to talk about is the SIM swap one, right? Or device change detection. So financial institutions particularly have a very good use case of using the SIM swap APIs to kind of detect if the user has recently swapped SIMs or changed devices. And that's a common fraud signal, right? If suddenly a user comes in from a different device or a different SIM and starts kind of logging into systems, transferring data, that's like a clear-cut sign that there is some sort of fraud happening. And then there are multiple other things. You can have network slicing, billing, charging APIs. The list goes on. And like I said, I can talk a lot about it, but these are some of the important use cases that we are seeing in the market as we speak.
I like what you're hitting. When I was talking earlier about the value of the next generation wireless infrastructure networks and some of the APIs we're talking about, long as, just like with the data set being structured, as long as those APIs are structured in a way where the consumers of them can get at the network, because we know APIs can mean access to configuration, change configuration of a network. That isn't what people who are operators really want, right? So it's, you mentioned access to data. If you think, all of you have been inside of a hotel building at some point in time, you tried to order the Uber, and the Uber is trying to figure out where you're really at, right? Because it doesn't have good location. Now, typically an app on your phone queries location on the phone itself, and it only has visibility to things it sees. Yet, what's one of the extreme values in the wireless infrastructure is its knowledge of your location, the ability through what isn't exposed today as APIs, but will be, right? Camara is making good open initiatives in that direction, is for the backend application that's driving your app to query the device for its location intelligence in a very different way. And that can give us a really well-defined user experience, right? It can change the CX dramatically because of how tight it is. And I zero in on that one because it's so easy to digest. All of us today, somewhere, way, shape, or form, use our phones to get in our vehicles and click a map on the screen of your car and have it take you places. It's become a dependency. If you did not have the ability to get GPS information to your phone to identify location, if we didn't have collective information gathered from the network to tell you that there's a traffic jam ahead, that user experience wouldn't be as nice, because you would always be in the wrong space. You wouldn't be on a road. And that hasn't made its way to indoors as much as it will in the future. And it's these areas of APIs that I think are going to be meaningful. They're going to add new value. They're going to make what has become a utility of using mobile in buildings significantly more value to the users.
Yep. Well, thank you, Vivek and Todd. And so I think that probably takes us to the end of this webinar. We'll obviously, take maybe one or two audience questions now, but thank you all for the insights, the honest perspectives, next generation technologies that at least we've talked about. And it's not just about faster speeds, right? That's not what connectivity is about only anymore. It's also about looking at different ways in which it can redefine customer value, operational agility, and also long-term sustainability. And so with that, there's one maybe interesting question right here that I'll probably go with. If your network could speak, what would it complain about the most in today's digital landscape? So whoever wants to go for that.
Short question for sure.
Well, it's a good one, and I think if your network could speak, it would be, at least in the context of these guys, it would be telling us that this utility that is assumed at this device doesn't exist in spaces where the user assumes it is. And look, everybody on this webinar has been in a scenario where you travel somewhere, you go into a building and you drop your call, or you look and you have no service and you wonder, right? And there's this funny broad assumption, right? Wireless just comes out of the clouds, and why isn't it everywhere? And it's easy to think about why a consumer would think that way. But I think the network would say two things. One is it would say, hey, I'm a Verizon phone, not to pick on Verizon, and I'm in an area where I really don't have very good signal, but I can look around me and I can see spectrum available that I could use. Oh, but guess what? It happens to be owned by a different operator. And it kind of goes to if you could redesign the telecom ecosystem from scratch today, what would you do differently? What another question. If you think about mobile devices, at any moment in time, all around you is 10 times more capacity than you have access to. And they're easier connectivity if this phone could connect to any of those available spectrums and culminate them together at any point in time, anywhere it was. But we have a funny industry, and naturally it's the way it is, in that you have to decide which one of 3 or 4 operators you're going to tie your hook to. And if we did it differently, your performance would be easily 10, 20x, and you would always stay connected.
I want to add to that. I think Todd's mentioned it multiple times. It's just the expectation is that capacity or network is there, and not just with the mobile devices, but if you think about where the AI data centers, I kind of coined something called the AI mirage. And we think about the AI data centers, because what's driving the AI data centers is where it's really a location of where they can get power. That's what all the talk is about. And to Todd's point, they assume, and everybody assumes, that you're going to have connectivity there, right? But it's a simple mirage if the hyperscalers and telecoms are building out, and other companies are building out those AI data centers. If they don't have connectivity to and fiber optic going to those data centers, you just spent $100 billion for nothing. And so if you think about it with Zayo and some of the other providers, there's actually very limited providers that are doing this, is it's a unique position where you're going and building out where those AI data centers are at. And if that's not done, then those are stranded assets. But it's just assumed that it's going to be there. And so, I think if you think about a network, the word I would say is mercy, right? It's almost like saying mercy. Like you have to plan this out, and it's a very capital intensive business to build these things out and to enable what Todd explained. Because I've been in telecom since, I don't know, 1990. So it's been a long time and seeing a lot of doing it. But it's not just with devices, but it's also with the demand on capacity and connectivity for those AI data centers. And they have to go to a place where it's not typically built. It's off. It's not the main core of companies' networks, telecom networks. So just to add into it.
Yeah.
Yep. No, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, David. Thank you, Todd. All right. So AI Core Spot team, I think I can hand it off to you now. If we have a little bit more time for audience questions, let us know and we'll try to squeeze them in as well.
Yeah. Any questions left, Manish? I think.
I think
if we can, I know the time is up as well. So what we can do is we can get to the audience questions. We can, circle them back and give the details to them later on. Okay. Sure. So let me give a closing remarks now. But thank you, Manish, for first of all expertly moderating today's session. And we deeply appreciate all the invaluable insights also shared by all our eminent speakers, which is Sundar, Todd, David, Vivek, and Sri. Your willingness to collaborate and impart your knowledge has greatly enriched our event. I'm sure audience would have loved it as well. For those who missed the live webinar or wish to revisit the discussion, the recording will be available soon on our company's YouTube channel. The event was also broadcasted live on LinkedIn Live for greater accessibility. Looking ahead, we are excited as an AI Core Spot unit to explore the latest technological innovations throughout the year. We will cover a lot of sectors in different industries: banking, service, insurance industry, telecom, consumer goods, retail, healthcare side of that, supply chain, manufacturing, and list goes on. So stay updated with tech news, upcoming events, registration details, visit our website, or follow us on our social media channel. Your engagement is invaluable. Please continue to interact with us and share our content within your networks. We extend our heartfelt thanks to InfoVision as well, who is our knowledge and innovation partner. Discover more about groundbreaking tech solutions by visiting the website infovision.com. Thank you once again for your participation and support. We look forward to hosting more insightful sessions in the near future. Wishing you a wonderful day, productive week, and a transformative year ahead as well. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
thank you all.
Bye-bye.